1, and there we go. All right, everybody. Thanks for participating. This is the Behavior Economics of Global Affairs. We are at this point way past half of the course, right? A gente já avançou bem adiante da metade do curso. A gente tem aí mais uns 3 ou 4 temas antes de terminar. And then that's it. So, I'm very glad to be here with Aline, Rodolfo, Hugo, Matheus, David, João, Caio, Susan, Felipe, Douglas, Ilídio, Pedro e agora o Eric. Acabou de entrar aqui, Eric. All right, it's very good to be with you all here. I would like very much for you guys to keep participating. Keep submitting your answers to the list of exercises. That's very, very important. I noticed that the last list of exercises, I had like fewer submissions. Então, muita gente aí não submeteu a última lista de exercícios. Eu sei que aqui e ali pode ter alguma coincidência com alguma outra prova que vocês estão fazendo e tudo mais, mas a lista de exercícios é muito importante, tá, gente? All right, guys. Tonight, we want to wrap up the discussion about discrimination and prejudice, right? A gente quer terminar, concluir aquela discussão sobre preconceito, discriminação. And then, we're going to talk about some fantastic, very key elements on public policy, all right? Behavior economics, starting to get to the point in which we are able to inform the formulation, the creation of policies, ok? Então, ainda na aula de hoje, a gente vai falar sobre elementos de orientação da economia comportamental para a formulação de políticas públicas, right? All right, so let me make very quick comments about the material that I suggested to you last Friday, okay? One of the videos I sent to you is a documentary which is actually available at Facebook. I searched for it out of Facebook and I couldn't find it. So, but you don't have to have an account with Facebook to watch it. You can just click there, ignore the option to log in, and then you can watch the video. And it's very, very good. It's about this guy, this scholar, this researcher who comes to Brazil to study prejudice in Brazil. So you can see how an American black guy tries to understand prejudice in Brazil. He comes to Pernambuco, he comes to Bahia, he goes to Rio de Janeiro and Minas Gerais, he talks to MV Bill, he talks to Zezé Mota, and he talks with many very interesting figures. So if you haven't watched that, please take notice, write down, try to find some time to watch it. You are missing some very important, some very interesting material, okay? And the other one is Paul Bloom's short lecture about how we should understand that prejudice in discrimination, in a sense, is natural. Well, what he actually says is that is the excessive implementation of something that is natural. So when we look at an apple or a chair or a dog, we know what that is because we can generalize from basic assumptions. We have an idea of what a dog is. So we look at very different dogs and we can tell that all of them are dogs. So what we tend to focus on specific points in an image and generalize it and categorize it, ok? Então, o fato de que a gente tende naturalmente a reconhecer padrões, generalizar alguns deles e categorizar alguns deles. Isso é um impulso natural. O que não é natural é quando a gente atribui valores morais a, a aspectos que não são de natureza moral e a gente acaba levando a um excesso nesse processo de categorização, de divisão. But anyway, so this guy is a very famous psychologist, and his talk is very provocative. I think you guys are gonna like it, okay? At the first sight, you may hear this guy and you say, come on, this guy's he's about to defend discrimination. He's gonna say that prejudice is okay. I don't believe it. But then, as he keeps talking, you understand that that's not the point. He's just trying to say, we have to understand how the brain works so we can see how prejudice and discrimination works. All right, good. So if you haven't seen that yet, please go ahead and visit the thing, the videos that I sent to you. I promise you that you guys will love it. Okay. All right. So let me go back here to our class notes. In a minute, please confirm to me that you can see the class notes in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Can you see it?
Yes.
All right. Thanks, guys. All right. So let me have this quick flashback here. So we started our discussion going back to some basic questions. How bad is prejudice and discrimination in Brazil? Do you think that Adam Smith has anything to say about prejudice and discrimination? So, well, we talked a lot about what is prejudice in Brazil. We know that we have like a color prejudice rather than racial prejudice. But anyway, it's racism. That's the term we use most of the times. We talked about Adam Smith being, even at this very early publication of his, he was talking about moral sentiments and empathy. So, in a sense, we could trace back behavior economics to Adam Smith. But then again, then we talked a little bit about study cases. We said that some kind of policies worked and some other policies didn't. The first case was when we were trying to create political affirmative action for women in India. And the policy worked quite well. So leadership coming from women ended up reducing prejudice against daughters and the expectations of parents about daughters' future. There was no more such a large gap uh, in the comparison of daughters and sons. Quando a gente falou que funcionou porque o exemplo de liderança de mulheres em determinadas vilas acabou criando nos pais um hiato menor, né, uma diferença menor entre as expectativas que eles tinham para os seus filhos e para suas filhas. Eles perceberam que as filhas também poderiam crescer, poderiam ocupar cargos de importância e tudo mais. And the other case, the one that didn't work, is when you try to use political affirmative actions to touch religious aspects of prejudice and discrimination. So when we're talking about castas, well, it is something that is still deeply ingrained in Indian culture, and it will take some time so that they can weaken a little bit those beliefs. But then again, so we came to the point that we had to understand prejudice and discrimination as a category, as an example of social behavior. All right, so somehow we learn about prejudice and discrimination. We are not born with prejudice and discrimination. Even though Paul Bloom was very emphatic to say that some of our tendency to categorize and to apply this us versus them mentality, some of that is natural. When we're talking about racial discrimination and prejudice, we can all agree that those are learned socially. I can see Kayo's hand is up. You have a question or a comment, Kayo? Go ahead, please.
Yes, I would like to ask something that just came to mind when
Okay.
you were talking about prejudice.
Uh-huh.
Can we link prejudice as to the system one as a quick, very fast response mental model, or it doesn't have anything to do with that?
That's a very good point. I think the answer is yes and no. So, if you watched Paul Bloom's, yeah, and I know you did, if you watch Paul Bloom's lecture, he's trying to tell you about this innate ability of the human brain to categorize and to create generalizations, identify categories quickly. So yes, that is related to system one. But prejudice and discrimination doesn't work only on that level. So people, when they behave in a discriminative way, they know what they're doing. Somehow they feel ashamed about that. So there's like a moral calculus, you see? And this calculus, the one we are talking about, this is not system one. This is something that you think, and sometimes you think socially. You evaluate your decisions, uh, how risky they are, how successful they may be, comparing the decisions to what other people do. So this is not system one anymore. So my answer is this: yes, there is something related to a very quick decision, and that will come. For example, let me just give you an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, so you are walking down the street, and it's dark at night in Brazil, and there's a black guy coming opposite direction to you, and many white people will feel afraid of that person just because he's black. So this is an impulse. You're not checking, you're not even stop and thinking, oh, come on, let me see, does this seem like an aggressive person, someone that can be violent towards me or something? No, you don't stop and evaluate, you have a quick response to this. Yeah, so yeah, you can have system one prejudice. Okay, no questions about that. But if you have like uh, if you are a father, and one day your daughter comes home with a boyfriend, and he's from a different color of your of you and your daughter, well, that's not a quick response. You can receive the person, you can talk to him naturally, and later, when the boyfriend leaves, you will come to the daughter and say, what are you doing? So this is not anymore system one. And what we are trying to say here is that this sort of prejudice and discrimination, it is not a cognitive feature of the human brain. This is something else. This is what we are talking about: social bias, or social norms, or social learning. So, in a sense, the answer is yes, system one is involved, but that's not all. You got it?
Yes, thank you.
All right, great. So, to this second stage of prejudice and discrimination is the one we are talking here right now. We have to understand that people learn, and they create this idea of how successful, or of how adequate, how respectful or admired your position will be in a group. Okay, so depending on the context you are, you may behave differently. Let me give you this example that for a long time has, cooked my brain here, my noodles. Um, Even when I was younger, I remember going to a soccer stadium and people were screaming horrible things at the players, at the referee, at a goalkeeper or something like that. And I would do the same. Now, you may look at me and say, come on, Luis, even you did that. And yeah, I did. So I say bad things about someone else's mother just because I'm part of a group. I will go back to that, the experiment with the babies in a minute. But my point is here, I was impressed when I realized that that behavior was not something that I decided to adopt individually. I felt forced to behave like that. I looked around, everybody was screaming at the referee. I had to do the same. I felt I felt compelled to do the same. And when I had this idea and I came out of the stadium, I started thinking and said, what made me behave like this? Because that's not me. That's not how I would react to anyone. If I disagree with a referee's decision, I don't, in general, I don't scream something horrible about this person's mother. It makes no sense whatsoever, and it's too aggressive to my behavior or my general aptitude or something like that. So, what I'm trying to say is that that behavior is not only promoted, but it is taught. Ela não é apenas promovida em contextos específicos, mas ela é ensinada. And at some point, I asked my father, I said, is it okay to say bad things here at the stadium? Bad words? We can scream bad words here. And he stopped for a while and he said to me, only here, okay? Not anywhere else. You can only say bad words here. He was trying to make sense out of that, okay? But the point is that we have to understand what's going on. What's going on is that we somehow think together. We are social animals, not only in the sense that we like to live together, but also in the sense that we tend to think together. We are group-minded individuals. So when you are part of a group, you feel like you are part of a group. It doesn't matter how short the lifespan you had on that group. If you feel part of it, you feel compelled to adopt certain behaviors and sometimes even to consider them natural, even though you haven't ever stopped to think about them. Now, let me go back here. I have some questions in the chat. I think it was João. Well, what about the experiment with babies? Isn't that subjective? No, let me explain what exactly that experiment told you. That experiment told you that it is natural to assume us versus them mentality, ok? Então, é uma tendência natural do cérebro assumir essa mentalidade do nós contra eles. Isso não é, por si só, preconceito. O nós contra eles não é, por si só, preconceito. Você pode fazer parte de um grupo que tenha pessoas brancas e pretas e você se sentir como parte daquele mesmo grupo e agir como um grupo contrário a grupos de outros lados. Pega o exemplo do futebol que eu acabei de dizer. Quando o juiz marca um pênalti contra o meu time, eu preto, eu branco, eu amarelo, eu mulher de idade de 70 anos, eu garotinho de 7 anos, todos nós estamos xingando nomes horríveis sobre a mãe do juiz. Então, assim, nós estamos adotando comportamento nós contra eles independente da questão de discriminação racial. Então, meu ponto é dizer assim, o comportamento nosso contra eles, ele talvez não se encaixe naquela definição de sistema 1 ou sistema 2, porque ele parece passar pelos dois. Ele está envolvido no rápido, mas ele também está envolvido no pensamento deliberado, calmo. Entendeu? Ah, beleza. Obrigado, João. Kyle is also saying something here. That's one thing I have to police myself when taking my 3 years old son to the game. Yeah, that's exactly, Kyle. It's almost inevitable, Kyle. When we are in a soccer field, you feel like you have to scream the same things. There was one example that I was shocked at the other day. I mean, because I'm an old guy now, right? I'm 50 years old or something. So I was shocked, but I remember the same things when I was younger. When the goalkeeper was just about to kick the ball in, starting the game, the goalkeeper is starting the game, and he takes these long steps back and he comes to kick the ball really hard. And then people say, viado, or something like that. And I mean, the whole stadium was screaming something that was like questioning his manhood, or I don't know, his gender choice, whatever. And I looked at that and said, that's absolutely insane. I mean, just because everybody's doing that, probably like half or even 70% of that people totally disagree with this kind of behavior, but they do. So it is absurd how incredible those evidences are. If you pay attention, you're going to see them all the time. All right. So my point here is not is to say that when we say that people are social animals, humans are social animals, it is not the same thing as saying that we like to live in groups. No, that it's much deeper than that. We tend to think together. We understand what is in the mind of each other, and we work as if we were a single brain. Can you believe that? I mean, you can get stupidity as a as a collective event, or as a disease. It can spread. Stupidity can spread throughout this mass of people. So this is the concept of sociality. This is what I wanted to tell you. The name that we give to this thing is sociality. Okay? Human sociality, the tendency among humans to associate and behave as members of groups. It affects decision making and behavior and has important consequences for development. And when we say development here, we are saying societal development, okay? So our tendencies mean that we are not purely selfish and wealth maximizing actors, as many economic models and policies assume. Check this out, guys. You can look at this from a good perspective too. You can look at this and say, wait, there's charity in every single society. What makes us care about someone that we have never seen, that we have never touched, that is not part of our family? So we are not that selfish description of the human being that most of the economic models assume. Actually, we tend to cooperate, we tend to share goals, and somehow we want to have a common understanding of what is correct, what is appropriate to behave individually or collectively. So that's a fact. We tend to behave collectively, and then it can also be good news. That's the point we're going to try to make here, okay? In any case, when you look at places like Brazil and you try to explain why this country, which has so many wealths, different levels, different kinds of wealths. We have money, we have natural resources, we have huge amounts of minerals, we have rain, we have very good weather most of the time. We don't have wars, we don't have snow, we don't have earthquakes. So, what prevents Brazil from being this highly developed society? Well, check this out. Check this sentence I'm going to read to you here. A key consequence of sociality for the development of nations is that groups and even entire societies can get stuck in collective patterns of behaviors, such as corruption, segregation, and civil war. Those patterns of behaviors arguably serve the interests of almost no one. Now, I'm going to translate that in Portuguese because this is such a key sentence. So here it goes. Uma consequência chave dessa ideia de socialidade para o desenvolvimento das nações é que grupos e mesmo sociedades inteiras podem ficar travadas, estacionadas em determinados padrões de comportamento coletivo, como corrupção generalizada, segregação, separação, divisão, guerra civil, e elas podem ficar nesses padrões, mesmo quando, olhando racionalmente, aqueles padrões de comportamento já não atendem a quase ninguém. A maioria das pessoas gostariam que eles mudassem. You see? Because you were stuck with what other people do. You can't control what other people do. So you feel like if I'm gonna change, I'm gonna be the only one changing. So there's no sense in trying to change. You see, you can get stuck. Now, the most astonishing and the most horrible description of this sentence here, at least the one that I can remember, is Israel and Palestina. Think about this for a while, guys. For how long those two societies, those two communities have been killing themselves? We are talking about decades of hate and of violence and of discrimination, segregation, and I mean, it's amazing how these two people can simply not live together. It is true that one of them will never accept the other, and the other one tells everyone else that they are only defending themselves. But the truth is much, much more complex than that. There is like a history of killing, of violence of all sorts, of discriminations, and an absolute sense of distrust. As pessoas desconfiam totalmente se você é um palestino, se você é um israelense. São muito poucas pessoas ali que conseguem realmente visualizar um ambiente de coexistência dos povos. A maioria das pessoas fala, não, aqui não tem jeito, aqui a gente vai continuar assim. E eles estão presos a esse padrão de comportamento há 60 anos, talvez mais, 60 e poucos anos. All right, so we have to understand what this is, and this is part of the problem of what we are. We have this sociality, we have this necessity to behave together, to work in groups, and to adopt the visions, the mentality, the conceptions, the values of our groups. It's very hard for us to, break free and think independently. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is when we say, on the other hand, even temporary interventions can have large and lasting effects on a community. Depending on how effective the intervention is, that may simply start a new way to work, a new way to believe, to work together, to think together. And the problem is that most of the times, 99% of the times, think about this, guys, honestly, okay? 99% of the times, policymakers underestimate our preferences to feel good about other people. A maioria das vezes que um gestor de políticas, alguém que toma decisão pelos outros, a maioria das vezes que ele pensa no cidadão, o modelo que vem na cabeça dele é de um cidadão egoísta. Você tem que oferecer um prêmio ou uma punição para ele agir. We don't explore the possibilities of people feeling like helping each other, of people getting a higher social status because they helped their communities. We don't explore that possibility. We think that it is, I don't know, it's too small and it's too ineffective. So at some point, we have to say this. Policymakers don't tend to think about what humans really are. They have this preconception of what is the human behavior. Tentei uma vez quebrar esse padrão ao apresentar minha ex-namorada israelense para um bom amigo saudita. Foi uma situação um pouco complicada de início. I can only imagine, Caio. Yeah, this is like almost impossible. I mean, the closest I've seen of this is in the United States. I had friends who were from Turkey and some other friends who were from Greece. And I didn't know up to that point how much they hated each other too. You know, historically, they hate each other, but they worked fine. I mean, they were reasonable people, at least when they were in the United States. Kai is also saying here, wouldn't people who already act in a charitable way not need any policy intervention to begin with? It turns out that charity is a very specific behavior. You know, you can have a very discriminatory person with lots of prejudice who still make donations for charity. So you may look at me and say, "Oh, come on," but then people are too complicated, Luis. And I say, yes. People's brains are not, easy to decipher. As pessoas realmente são muito complicadas. Então, uma pessoa que seja caridosa, que seja sensível, que seja relativamente, inclinada a pensar no bem alheio, empática, mesmo essa pessoa pode ter preconceito. E a gente encontra isso dentro de organizações de caridade. A gente encontra pessoas que fazem a caridade assumindo que quem está recebendo a caridade é inferior a ela. E não que ela está numa situação inferior. Acham que são pessoas que nunca vão melhorar, por isso que eu tenho que ajudar, porque senão elas vão morrer ali. You see? We can combine charitable behavior with prejudice and discrimination. Unfortunately, those things exist together. All right, but my main point here, the three main points here is this. First, we can get stuck, and in a sense, Brazil is stuck, right? Second, interventions, if we understand what is this social behavior, if we deeply understand how it works, we can see hope. We can see, all right, so if things tend to spread fast, then I can use that. I can promote better behaviors, and those may spread throughout the population. Yeah, that's the second good point. And the third point is this: policymakers don't think like that. O político ou o gestor de uma política de saúde, de uma política de assistência social, ele não tende a pensar assim. A maioria deles pensa o quê? Que o ser humano é um bicho egoísta. Que se ele não oferecer alguma coisa, se ele ou não ameaçar com a punição, ou não oferecer alguma coisa, ninguém vai mudar comportamento nenhum. All right, so those are very important issues that were brought by very interesting researchers. They were not like, my opinion. This is not what Luis thinks about society. This has been the conclusion of a number of studies who scientifically tried to test those hypotheses. So this is the important thing we have to talk about here. We are not talking about opinions. I'm not telling you how nice the world could be. I'm telling you here is what the results of many scientific researches have brought to us. And that those are the facts. Those are what we could learn from those, okay? Any questions so far? All right, so I'm going to mention here very quickly a few more examples of this. Some interventions that work quite well used the idea of comparing economic incentives with social status. Okay, so the idea was like this: you have these women, they were hairstylists, and they work in a barber shops or in places where people go to make their hair done or something like this. And they were in a special position to talk to other women. So basically, they wanted to tell them that they should wear condoms whenever they have sexual intercourse with someone that they don't know, or something like this, okay? But then they said, okay, how can we stimulate these ladies to do her best and to convince other people to protect themselves, okay? So they tested with economic incentives, giving money, and they tested with social status. So they would make publications and make everyone knows about the person who distributed more condoms to the society, or who sold many more condoms than other people. So they created this comparison of different incentives, and it turned out that the social status of someone who got like a better result was more effective to stimulate this empathic behavior than money. So, I mean, this was not something that you would expect, right? Então vamos lá. Se eu estou fazendo uma política pública de tentar estimular o uso de preservativo por mulheres, e eu tenho de um lado a política sendo usada em algumas comunidades, e ali eu estou dando dinheiro para quem conseguir mais mulheres aceitar e ter na carteira, ter na bolsa aquele preservativo, ou comprar, e eu tenho uma série de outras comunidades em que eu uso outras formas de incentivo, dando status social para quem tiver conseguido convencer mais gente a se proteger. E eu observo depois como se eu tratasse amostras de um estudo científico, de um experimento sobre o uso de um medicamento. Eu mostro estatisticamente que o impacto do estímulo através de status social é mais eficiente do que dar dinheiro. All right, so this is sociality, right? It means that people can behave in certain ways considering how they are seen by their group. And then you have like, okay, so I can use this for the good. It is not only think like oh, Brazil is doomed. We can use this sort of knowledge to understand that people are not that selfish. And they somehow they prize their images in a group, right? There are some other examples about how people adopt violent behavior, how people are more or less inclined to discriminate other groups. I'm not going to go over those for a long time. I wanted to get to this point here. I want to talk about this device that was created by the British government, okay? So, for the remaining of this class, I'm going to be talking to you about mind space. So this expression that you see above there, mind space, let me use the pen here. I'm sorry, that's not what I want. I want the pen. This expression here, mind space, actually refers to an approach developed by this team of consultants to the British government, okay? So the name of the team is down here. Where's my pen? It's here. The Behavioral Insight Team, okay? So they were mostly consultants hired by the British government to try and improve the impact of public policies, okay? All right. Now let's have a look at some of the things. Our objectives remain the same as they have always been. So what are the objectives of those guys? First, making public services more cost effective and easier for citizens to use. Think about this. Cost effectiveness is not willing to spend less. It is willingness to spend better, ok? Então, os caras aqui, o objetivo não era gastar menos com as políticas públicas, era ter maior impacto com as políticas públicas. É que para cada dólar, cada libra gasta, eles tivessem maior impacto. So the goal is not to minimize costs, is to make that the expenditure has a larger impact. And the second point here, like a main objective, is services must be accessible. They have to be easier for citizens to access, to use, ok? Então imagina quando você chega numa UPA, quando você chega no hospital público, quando você chega numa repartição do INSS, a quantidade de documento que você tem que passar, a quantidade de fila que você tem que enfrentar, é senha, tem que chegar mais cedo e tal. Nada disso é fazer o serviço ficar acessível e ficar fácil para o cidadão. Okay? All right, so right from the start, they're saying, okay, we have to make public policy easy and accessible for people. The second point is we want to improve outcomes by introducing a more realistic model of human behavior to policy. Então os caras falam assim, a gente precisa assumir um modelo mais realista do comportamento humano na hora de desenvolver uma política. E a terceira coisa, we have to enable people to make better choices for themselves. What's the name of this thing? We have talked about it here when we were discussing ethical nudge. Qual que é a expressão que a gente usou, gente, quando a gente estava falando sobre o empurrãozinho ético? Deixa eu ver aqui no chat o que vocês colocaram. Não consigo ver, não. Aqui. No nudge, eu estou falando do nudge. Susan, eu estou falando assim. Quando a gente tinha os critérios para considerar que o empurrãozinho era ético, uma das palavrinhas que a gente usou lá tinha a ver com essa ideia de facilitar ou empoderar as pessoas para fazer melhores escolhas por elas mesmas. What's the name of this? The name of this is autonomy. Autonomia. Então, a gente não quer fazer política pública para criar pessoas dependentes da política pública. A gente quer fazer políticas públicas para que as pessoas passem a tomar melhor decisões por elas mesmas, de preferência que um dia percam a dependência, a necessidade de uma política pública. Alright, so 3 goals. Public services should be cost-effective and easier to use. Second, improve outcomes by considering a more realistic model of human behavior. And third, autonomy. We want people to make better choices for themselves. Okay? So this is the goal of the Behavioral Insight team. And how did they achieve that? Well, basically they said, let's create this thing called mind space. So what is mind space? If we were to translate the name mind space, it would be simply like espaço mental. But mind space is not only that. It's a set of the most robust, non-coercive influences on people's behavior, captured in a simple mnemonic expression, which can be used as a quick checklist when making policy. Então, mind space é só uma maneira de memorizar cada uma dessas letrinhas aqui, ó. M, I, N, T, S, P, A, C, E. All right, so what each of those letters stand for? Okay, the first one, M stands for messenger, which means when you're trying to convey a message, please ask yourself, who is the messenger? Na hora de tentar levar uma mensagem à comunidade, a pessoa que faz o enunciado da mensagem importa. Se você puser uma doutora, um doutor branco, alvo, com cara de gente muito séria e importante, para ensinar para as pessoas como que elas têm que lavar a mão, como que elas têm que cuidar da higiene nas suas casas, as pessoas podem ficar intimidadas por aquele doutor, por aquela autoridade. So choosing the right messenger will affect how effective your communication is. You may look at me and say, oh, that's obvious. And I say, no, it's not. Because we don't do that. We just get anyone there and some TV actor to say the things that we want them to say. We have to think more carefully about who is the messenger. Okay? Let me give you an example. Have you guys seen this propaganda with the dengue mosquito killing that they are showing on TV these days? Vocês viram essa propaganda do combate à dengue, do mosquito da dengue que estão passando na TV esses dias? A personagem principal que eles colocam é uma dona de casa. Uma dona de casa falando um monte de gíria, um jeito meio engraçado assim, com a cara de tiazinha da comunidade. So, what they're trying to say is not like to make a joke only. They're saying, this is someone like you, and therefore you should listen to a person like that. Yeah, it's very good. It's very effective too, you know. The other discussion is how much people will act upon that. But, I mean, people remember that commercial very easily. Okay, so the first one, messenger. Whenever you are developing a new policy, think about who is the messenger. Otherwise, your message will not get there. will not be completely accepted, okay? Oh yeah, she has a saber of light or something like that. Yeah, imitating some video, some filmes or something like that. Pois é muito interessante, né, João? É bem feito, usa a expressão do povão, usa o humor de uma maneira criativa, sem ser pejorativa, sem ser, sei lá, degradante na maneira como retrata aquelas pessoas. All right. So the second point is incentives. You say, oh, what is that? Yeah. I mean, we still behave as economists, right? We still have some selfishness. Yeah, we do respond to incentives. So if you create like penalties or fees, yeah, it's different when we create prizes, when we help out people, when we give them some kind of recognition. Yeah, but incentives matter. So if you want to improve the health of people, you shouldn't make so hard for people to access doctors and nurses. Se você está realmente preocupado com a saúde das pessoas, você precisa aumentar muito o tamanho de UPAs que a gente tem, porque é muito comum você chegar numa UPA, principalmente no final de semana, e ela está lotada e não tem médico suficiente para atender todo mundo, não tem enfermeiro suficiente para atender todo mundo. Quando você está deixando tantas pessoas esperando por horas para ser atendidas, está falando para elas assim, não vem aqui. Só vem aqui se for realmente um caso de vida ou morte. That's what we're saying. You're not helping. I mean, at least you're not helping as much as you should. Okay? So, the first one, messenger. The second one, incentives. The third one, the letter N stands for norms. But wait, we are not talking about normas, regras. The sense here of norms is more like social norms, ok? Aqui são normas sociais, são padrões de comportamento social. Então, são tabus, são coisas que todo mundo, mais ou menos, tem que... Todo mundo... Quer ver, por exemplo? If you create vaccine campaigns and you tell people that they will have to bring the kids on Saturday afternoon so they will get vaccinated, okay? That's not a good idea. What most of the people do on Saturdays the afternoon? Well, they watch sports, they have barbecues, they drink alcohol. They don't want to take their kids to some immunization campaign on afternoons of Saturdays. You have to think better about that. You have to help out. I mean, it is not normal for people to get out of their routines on a Saturday afternoon to go to get some kids vaccinated. They won't do it. And instead of fighting against this or considering this a neglect, I don't know, a cultural barrier, it's not cultural. We're talking here about incentives. People prize their time on Sundays afternoons or Saturdays afternoons. So you have to understand what is the common behavior of these people instead of just fighting against it, okay? The third ones are defaults. Yeah, that's a very good point, Caio. But I like the ones in shopping centers too, you know, like they are doing right now. This week, if you have kids from 9 to 14 years old, and if you are in any of those big shopping centers in Recife, your kids could get vaccination for HPV, for meningite, and also for gripe and COVID. So they are all four vaccines available for kids and for adults too, but the target is kids from 9 to 14 years old, especially when we think about meningitis and HPV. All right, so yeah, Now, default, the letter D stands for default. Default here means standard choice, ok? Então, o default aqui é o escolha padrão. Quando a gente chega numa loja de sanduíche, chega lá, tem os combos, né? Ah, eu quero comer o combo número 2, o combo número 3. É como se alguém já tivesse feito as escolhas para você e te oferecesse alguns padrões de escolhas pré-estabelecidos. Ao contrário do que a gente pensa, isso muitas vezes não é uma forma de manipulação, é uma forma de ajudar. Porque a gente é muito ruim de fazer escolhas quando tem muitas opções. All right, but then again, when we're talking about policy development, and we use the word defaults, we are talking about the example of organ donations. Remember that one that we talked right in the beginning of the course? Áustria e Alemanha, dois países com cultura semelhante, com história semelhante. Um deles, você nasceu, você é doador de órgãos. O outro, você nasceu, você não é doador de órgãos. Para se transformar em doador de órgãos, você tem que simplesmente assinar um papel. No outro, para você deixar de ser doador de órgãos, você simplesmente tem que assinar um papel. But the standard option was like, in Austria, you are born here, you are an organ donator. In Germany, you are born here, you are not an organ donator. So if you invert the standard choice, the results are hugely different. In one of the countries, the number of organ donators is like 23, 30% of the population. In the other case, is 75, 80% of the population. So the standard choice matters, okay? I'm just about to finish. I think we are going far enough, but let me just say here about this last one here, salience. Salience means saliência, ou a chamada de atenção, ou destaque. Destaque. Sometimes we can help people making better choices just by showing them in a very bright way, in a very highlighted way. Look, it's obvious, you have to do this. It's right there. So it helps people to understand what the choices are. Então, às vezes, a gente simplesmente dando destaque para alguma coisa, a gente consegue fazer com que a atenção dela seja capturada ali por aquele momento e a decisão seja um pouquinho melhor, tá? It's already 9:45. I think I'm going to stop here and I'm going to record a short video with the rest of the discussion about mind space. But I wanted to ask you guys first, you have any questions, any comments? Pessoal, a gente está falando aqui de uma espécie de um checklist de que alguém que vai desenvolver uma política pública deveria passar. Eu já verifiquei quem vai ser o mensageiro da campanha? Ah, não. Então vou pensar de novo. Ah, tem algum incentivo negativo para a pessoa não participar? Tem algum incentivo positivo que eu possa adicionar para a pessoa participar? Normas. Ah, será que eu estou desenhando isso aqui e vai entrar em conflito com um comportamento que já é predominante nessa comunidade? Default. Será que eu posso colocar uma escolha padrão que acaba levando as pessoas a não mudarem, e isso sendo bom para elas mesmas? Aí o último, saliência, né? Destaque. Será que eu tenho alguma maneira que eu chamo a atenção da pessoa da importância daquela decisão, de modo que ela acaba fazendo uma escolha melhor por ela mesma, só pela minha capacidade de chamar a atenção? All right, so this is a checklist, and we're going to see later that those can instruct, can help out when you're trying to design more effective policies, ok? Pode falar, Caio, diga lá.
Professor, a minha única pergunta é duas. Primeiro, esse conteúdo, essa apresentação está no nosso grupo, né? Tá disponível?
Yeah. Sim, tá
Tá.
lá. Tá lá no Google Classroom. A outra.
E a outra pergunta na sua experiência, quão frequentemente esse checklist ele é usado na hora de formular políticas públicas?
No Brasil, muito raramente, mas é um pouco mais do que você imagina. Quer ver? Vou te dar um exemplo de uma política pública que usa algum estímulo aqui, tá? teve uma campanha sobre a tuberculose, na época do Copa do Mundo, que usava o Thiago Silva. O Thiago Silva é um jogador que foi capitão da nossa seleção e tal, e ele teve tuberculose. E ele ficou um tempo para se tratar, para se ver livre. O problema da tuberculose é que a pessoa pode ter tuberculose por 6 meses, 1 ano, 2 anos, 5 anos, 10 anos. O tratamento é muito longo. Para você realmente ficar livre da tuberculose, às vezes pode gastar muito mais que 6 meses. 1 ano e meio, 2 anos, para você ficar livre, de fato, da tuberculose. As pessoas abandonam o tratamento no meio. Aí você escolheu um cara na época da Copa. Um cara que todo mundo queria ouvir. Thiago Silva. Você escolheu um mensageiro correto. Quer ver um outro exemplo de saliência, de destaque? Bolsa Família. Olha o nome do programa. Bolsa Família. Não é ajuda renda. Não é Renda Mais Brasil. Quando alguém escolheu o nome Bolsa Família, foi muito inteligente. Ele estava dizendo assim, esse dinheiro aqui não é para ser usado em outro fim, senão para sustentar a família. Então, assim, aqui e ali, a gente vê algumas dessas técnicas sendo usadas, embora muitas vezes de forma intuitiva, entendeu? Sem que a pessoa realmente tenha usado o instrumento do checklist para conferir. Só para te deixar mais animado, em outros países do mundo, essa coisa é cada vez mais comum. Não é só no governo britânico, acontece no Canadá, acontece na Austrália, acontece em vários países do mundo, a incorporação de elementos de economia comportamental no desenho de políticas públicas. All right, guys, this is it. Thank you for participating up to this point. And I will stop recording here. I'm going to be around for a few more minutes if you want to talk to me. Otherwise, enjoy your night, okay?